Tom Coughlin looks like a different coach. Alex Smith looks like a different quarterback. Time to talk NFC Championship with Hall of Fame quarterback Troy Aikman here on Hot Reads. I'm Tom Vandervoort. And Troy, really a couple of the teams that we didn't expect to win last week. I guess the underdogs won last week, and now the Giants go to San Francisco. And I want to talk about Coach Tom Coughlin because as a fan, I'm looking at this guy and I'm watching him on the sidelines, and he just seems a little bit lighter. The players seem to have a little bit of a different feeling about him. He's a notoriously tough coach. Obviously, in a Sporting News poll mid-season, I think he was the guy that players voted they would least like to play for. Have you seen any kind of appreciable change in Tom Coughlin? And if so, what does that have to do with the Giants' late season success?
Well, I think he's changed some. I think if you go back to when he first became head coach in this league with Jacksonville, very tough. I had some friends that played for him on those teams, but over the years he has loosened up a little bit as far as what his rules are and what he demands. But overall, his core has not changed and will not change. And I'm a big fan of Tom Coughlin's. And, you know, that poll that came out, I think it was unfair. I think that those that voted that way against Tom Coughlin were people that have never played for him. And I believe that within that locker room, yeah, there's always a little bit of tension. I think that's typical with great coaches. But I think that when it's all said and done, these players have a great deal of respect for him and admiration for him because they know that he's helped them get to where they are today. And, you know, there was a time when I've always believed that teams take on the personality of their head coach. For the longest time, I wasn't sure that that was going to happen with this Giants team, but it sure did there at the end of the season. They're well coached, they're prepared, they're tough-minded, and in big games, most of the time, Tom Coughlin's teams play really well, and that has been the case again this year.
All right, well, let's look at the other side of the ball and the 49ers because this is a great story this season, and a big part of it, obviously, is Alex Smith. And you come down the last week, obviously the quarterbacks aren't on the field at the same time, but basically he had to match Drew Brees in the fourth quarter in by far the biggest game of his career. He had a sort of Steve Young-like run and a Joe Montana-like throw in that game to win it for the 49ers. And I have to ask, as a quarterback and a guy who came into the league with a lot of scrutiny, these seem like plays that could maybe change your attitude about yourself, about the game, about your place in the game. And I'm wondering if you ever had those kind of moments and how you think that game and those plays might affect Alex Smith.
Well, I didn't have a particular play or a particular moment to where you feel like, okay, now I'm viewed differently or now I've arrived. I think everything kind of builds on the previous successes and things that occur. And so, very early on in my career, I knew that I had the ability to be able to play at a high level in this league. And then you realize that a lot of other things have to kind of come together in order to be able to show that. My guess is that Alex Smith has known that he's had the ability to go on and be a really good player in this league, but he's needed some other things around him. And that's not just good players. I mean, that's a big part of it. But I think that, being put in an environment and within an offensive system that allows you to flourish. And probably the thing that's overlooked the most is having an organization and coaches, and particularly a play caller, that really believes in you. And when you have that, then you start to gain confidence. And as you gain confidence, you start to put together good games. And when that happens, then you start looking at yourself differently. People start looking at you differently. And then that continues to grow more and more confidence for that player. And so, Alex Smith has had a tough start to his career. I've said it many times, he's not a young player anymore. I mean, he came into this league in the same draft class as Aaron Rodgers. We certainly don't look at Aaron as being a young player in this league. But I think that, one, Alex Smith was very young when he came into the league, into the draft. Secondly, he's had a lot of different coaches, and he's probably had a lot of people telling him, or people outside of the locker room, media, fans, pointing out all the things that he's done wrong. And I think finally he's in with a group that is pointing out all the things that he's doing right. And because of that, he's doing more things right. And I'm really proud of him. I mean, he had an opportunity to leave the 49ers and go elsewhere, and I would have been the first to say that's probably a good thing for him in light of everything that's happened in San Francisco. But instead, he hung in there. Jim Harbaugh believed in him. And he's had a remarkable season. I mean, his numbers aren't going to compare with the guys we talked about a moment ago, Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees and Tom Brady. but he's doing the things he has to do to win. And to me, that's what matters, is he's winning games and he's doing the right things to make that happen. And he did it last week. When they needed him to make plays to win that game, he was able to do it. And I think that's what the great quarterbacks do.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Jim Harbaugh, and before I let you go, I got to ask you about him. Clearly, he's brought something to this 49ers team, and if you had to try to put your finger on it, what is that specific thing that maybe Jim Harbaugh has brought to the 49ers that has allowed them to progress at the rate that they have?
Well, he's brought it, he's got good coaches, for one, but this league is really not about X's and O's. I mean, that's a part of it, but it really is. It's providing a culture within a locker room that lets players know that this is the way it's going to be, and you put them then in a position to have success. And I know that, surprisingly, we've only had the 49ers one time this season. Here's the #2 seed in the NFC, and yet we only had them one time. And, interestingly enough, it was against the New York Giants when they played there at Candlestick. But I know in talking with a number of players, I asked them at that time, wow, what's different about the organization now as opposed to the last several years? And they all said it's all about football. It's not a motivational speech every day of the week. It's not, it's just we come in and everyone knows what their job is and they do it, and that's the focus. And that's what Jim Harbaugh has been able to do. Some coaches can do that, some can't. Jim Harbaugh has had success at every stop, going back to when he first became a head coach at San Diego, and then, of course, at Stanford. And now he's doing it in San Francisco. And so he's got a way of communicating with these players that's bringing out the best in them.
Well, certainly, I hope we're going to see that off both teams this weekend coming up. I expect we will. Should be a fantastic game. Looking forward to your call of it with Joe Buck, and we'll talk to you next week and talk about what happened.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tom.